Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised. In our society, most people are content to go through their daily lives safely and peacefully. But our society is not always safe or peaceful. For that reason, some men and women answer a higher calling to defend and protect their fellow man. You probably know someone who is one of these people, or maybe you are one of these people. The ones who see and do the things most people would never want to. These things are sometimes heroic and beautiful, but often they are horrific and terrifying. It's these things they don't share about with other people. It's these things they carry with them, so you don't have to. But when they get together, they talk to each other about them. And they call these stories war stories. Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom.
And I'm Chuck.
And we have been having a good time over at Locker Room, but I am super stoked for today's episode. And I don't know about you, but we've got Jess with us. And I don't know about you, Chuck, but I'm super happy to be doing this topic because Jess
you live in Idaho.
Well, that too. But Jess, how are you, sir?
I'm good.
And Jess, you are a retired federal agent, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you've come on to talk to us about your time with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which, let's face it, you know, those are three great things all scrunched together in one agency.
Yeah, right? It's a great barbecue.
Yeah, actually, it was one of, you know, when I was considering what law enforcement agencies to join, as far as three-letter federal agencies, ATF was probably at the top of my list. And I must say, I have worked with some of the finest ATF agents ever to grace this planet when I was working undercover. And I'm really excited to discuss some of this stuff with you.
All right. Good. Excellent. Yeah.
But we only have a limited amount of time, and I know we're going to really have a lot to cover. So I thought we'd just get into it. Why don't you tell us about how you kind of ended up, you know, at the ATF and how that journey was, how long you were with them, and then we'll go from there.
Well, pretty straightforward. I graduated from San Jose State in 1970, law enforcement degree. Interviewed with about 14 different law enforcement agencies just for fun. And then ATF was hiring, and they sent me a telegram. They'd come up and get interviewed.
Telegram?
A telegram, an actual telegram, yeah. So I got interviewed, and they said, yeah, we'll hire you. And at that time, they sent me a letter. I was making $6,500 a year as an ATF agent.
Wow.
1970. Jeez. But advancement comes good. Just signed to San Francisco, worked out there for a few months. We opened the San Jose office. I moved down to San Jose, where I was from, and worked there for about 3 years, primarily prohibited people with guns and outlaw motorcycle gangs. You know, at that time, ATF was chasing bikers all over the country.
Right. And, Hells Angels and Banditos.
Yeah, I did some of that. We chopped up a bike, and I got dirty and nasty and had a beard and rode around for a while. And then in the office one day, my boss came in and wanted to know if anybody wanted to go to Alaska. They were looking for an agent to go up there. I said, sure, I'll go to Alaska. So he said, okay, fill out the paperwork. I called my wife at home. We'd been married about 8 months. I said, do you want to go to Alaska? She said, where's that? I said, it's way up north. She said, okay, fine. So we drove up to Alaska, worked there for about 3 years, mostly related to pipeline. The pipeline was being built then, so we had a lot of Oklahoma and Texas oil men up there doing crazy things. And a lot of drugs, a lot of prostitution, a lot of bad guys shooting people. Worked to the Mounties on some gun running cases into Canada. It had a good time. It was really nice. But after 3 years, my wife said, I want to start a family, not up here. So we pulled out of there and transferred to Portland, Oregon. At that time, it was a really beautiful town. It was just a great place. And I got back into the biker thing when I got back down there and went for a couple of years undercover. And Rode
Was there a
motorcycle.
big biker element in Portland?
Well, we had the Gypsy Jokers who had moved out of California about a decade earlier, and around Portland.
Were they pushed out by the Hells Angels?
It was an agreement. If you go back in the history, the Jokers and the Hells Angels said, "Hey, we'll take California. You can have the Northwest." And a lot of the old Gypsy Jokers became Hells Angels around the Bay Area. They decided they want to stay, and they just opted out. But up there, we had the Jokers. We had a couple of bike clubs out the, Brothers Few, Outsiders. They were going to be Hells Angels. So I worked them. We did some stuff up there. And at the same time, when you do undercover, people start talking about, well, let's let Jess do it because he's got a beard.
Right.
And so they sent me up to Washington to buy guns. They sent me over to Idaho. And that was the first time I ran into some of these white power people seriously in Idaho. And we bought some bad guy guns and stuff like that. Worked in Montana for a while. And then came back. My son was born in Portland, so I wasn't gone all the time. And after about 3 years there, and the ice storms were coming in, if you're ever on the Columbia River in the winter, it's not comfortable.
Yeah, I've heard those ice storms kind of.
It was nasty. My boss came in one day in Portland and said, "Hey, they're looking for somebody to go to Guam." And everybody laughed except me. I said, "I'll go to Guam." And I called my wife at home. I said, "Hey, you want to go to Guam?" And she says, "Where's that?" I said, "It's out." I
sense a trend.
It's out by Hawaii. She says, "Oh yeah, I'll go to Hawaii." So 3 months later, we were nestled in our place on Guam. Actually, I was assigned to a DEA task force out there, and their job was interdicting Southeast Asian heroin coming into the United States through Cambodia and Thailand and the old Golden Triangle, I guess they called them.
So is Guam like a hub?
It was a transit point primarily.
Okay.
And so drugs would come through there, and they would work on, we seized a couple of fishing vessels loaded down with drugs. It was amazing. And we also worked cases on guns leaving the United States, going to Japan and going to the Philippines. I worked a big case out there where we ended up indicting, 19 people, and half of them were Japanese organized crime figures. So it was
like Yakuza type?
Yakuza, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a long story. You'd need about an hour and a half to listen to that one, because
we'll have to do that another time.
That dealt with religious groups coming over to Saipan and doing all sorts of things. But anyway, after about 3 years there, my daughter was born on Guam. We decided it was time to come back to the States. So I said, "All right, I want to come back." And they said, "Well, we're going to send you to San Francisco. We got problems in the office there, and we think you'd be a good stabilizing influence between the agents and the boss." And I said, no, I'm not going to be a stabilizing influence anywhere. Send me back to San Jose. I used to work there. And they compromised and sent me to Oakland.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
What a
Thanks
nice
a
compromise.
lot. Yeah, I worked 2 years in Oakland. We did some undercover stuff there. I had an undercover storefront going. And then they closed the Oakland office and sent us to San Francisco anyway. And I worked on the arson task force over there for about a year, primarily, arson for profit schemes, things like that.
Sure.
Then I put in for some supervisor jobs, and I got picked to be the supervisor in San Jose. So I came back to San Jose, spent my last 10 years as supervisor in San Jose. We covered 4 counties, and had a good time. I had a good time with ATF. I loved it. I've always liked guns anyway, and bombs after they've gone off are fun. But
yeah, right.
But no, it's
good. When did they add the E?
Oh boy,
officially?
That would have been officially, I want to say about 1970, early 70s, when the Explosives Control Act was passed. When I came on in 1970 itself, it was still, at that time, it was IRS. We were Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division of the IRS, and then they changed it to a bureau. And then the Explosives Control Act, I think in 72 or 74, they decided to add the E, but nobody ever used it. It was still ATF.
Right. It's still ATF.
Yeah, it's ATF.
Yeah.
It always has been. So that was about it. And I retired in 98, took a look at my salary and took a look at what my retirement would be. And I figured I could mow lawns for the difference. And
yeah, right. At some point you're working for free.
Yeah. I went to the law school my last 4 years while I was working. and graduated from law school, retired, passed the California bar, and then got a job with the Santa Clara County Public Defender's Office as a defense attorney for bad guys.
Wow.
So I did that. I did that for about 15 years.
How was that?
That was fun. That was interesting. I met a lot of wonderful people outside the bar, obviously.
Right.
But it was good. It was one of those, things you do in life that lets you see how things go. Again, it was a very rewarding experience. Frustrating as hell. I used to beat my head on the wall and cry a lot, but that's normal. But then after 15 years of that, I decided to retire again. And I went back to teaching. I taught for a while at San Jose State, and I went back to teaching. I did that for about 3 years. My last 3 years teaching terrorism at San Jose State. And then decided, okay, that's enough. And so I left that. I still do some part-time teaching. I do a lot of consulting for attorneys on gun matters and gun laws. And that's about it. That's, my career. Prior to, I'll go back a little bit, prior to going to law school, I spent 5 years as a team leader for ATF Special Response Team, the San Francisco Field Division. Our little baby SWAT team, the guys,
right.
And so, but after that, I decided I want to go to law school. So I told them, no more of this. I'll just be a supervisor again. So it went from there.
Well,
man,
and here we are.
Going to law school.
4 years, 4 nights a week.
That's crazy to me. That's insane. But I mean, my old man, he's been on this show, and he started at LA, and then he transitioned out to be an instructor for the state of California, doing all. So I'm familiar with, that concept. It's just, I can't imagine like going to law school while working a law enforcement career.
You got to have a good family. You got to have a good family.
Yeah. That, for sure. Cause they're going to do the lion's share of what you can't do, which is going to be most everything, because you're going to be working or studying.
Yep. Truly.
That's crazy to me.
That's good for you. Really crazy.
And what? So we got 2 other episodes. We got to talk to you about what it's like to go be a defense attorney once you've been a cop, and we got to talk to you about this Yakuza thing. But that's not why we're here today. We're here because of an operation that many people know about, but I think as time passes, people are getting less and less aware of it, which was the Ruby Ridge incident, which is close to my neck of the woods, as we discussed before we started the show.
Yeah.
And you were involved in that, so I am definitely all ears. And what's your story? The floor is yours.
Well, we didn't. Yeah, I didn't know anything about Randy Weaver. I didn't know anything about much of what was going on up there, because I'd been in San Jose. I'd been up in Idaho in 10, 15 years. We knew the Aryan nations had established a compound, if you will, up there. Richard Butler was head of that white power, anti-Semitic, goofy wannabe Nazis thing.
It was the Christian identity movement.
Yeah. He was big into that, and Weaver was a Christian identity type person. But let me come back to him in a minute. What happened? I'll start from my intro into this thing. I got a phone call one Friday afternoon from my boss in San Francisco. He said, we got to get the team together because a deputy U.S. Marshal's been murdered by a white power person up in Idaho. And the guy's a former Green Beret, and he's dangerous, and all the usual stuff. Well, I didn't know Randy Weaver from a hole in the ground, so I said, fine, we'll get everybody ready. We'll get up there if we can.
Right. With that description, it sounds like a real bad guy.
Yeah. Well, that was it. That's the way it came down. And so I called my team members. We have 21 people on the team. I got about 18 of them, I think. I said, pack your bags, sit by the phone. I'll call you when we get ready to move. And I called my boss back and said, okay, everybody's set to go. When are we going? He says, well, I got to wait for headquarters. Yeah. So, okay, fine. 3 or 4 hours later, I called him again. What does headquarters say? Well, the Seattle response team's up there, and the Dallas response team is on the way. And I said, we're a heck of a lot closer than Dallas.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dallas.
That's far.
Well, the rationale from headquarters was Dallas had been up and running for about 2 years. So they're a pretty good team. We'd only been in operation for about 6 months, and I don't think they, thought that we should go right away. So that was Friday night. Saturday, I called the National Guard and I said, look, we may be going up to Idaho. Can we get an aircraft standing by up at Moffett Field, which is a little north of San Jose? So they pulled a Hercules down on the runway and just set him there Saturday morning in case, we got the go word. All day Saturday, I'm on the phone to my boss, and then I'm getting phone calls from the Seattle team leader and the Dallas team leader who are up in Idaho saying, when are you guys coming up? And I'm saying, as soon as headquarters says we can come up there. Sunday, nothing. Late Sunday night, I get a call from the National Guard saying, hey, we got to move the Hercules. He can't be sitting here, another 48 hours. I said, okay, fine.
It's not exactly a small plane.
No, and it's, it's a resource. They got to use it. And, it was being wasted. And so I said, appreciate it. Thanks, guys. 1 a.m. Monday morning after Sunday, I get a phone call. Headquarters just released us to go to Idaho. And I said, well, the bird's gone. So we had to fly commercial. So picture this, 21
government at work.
Wow. 21 armed agents getting on, a commercial airline, and all the passengers are going, what? And I said, just training exercise, folks. Don't worry about it. So we got up to Idaho. I flew in on a light plane. The rest of the team drove up in cars out of Spokane. We got debriefed by the FBI because HRT had gotten there, almost immediately once the call went out. They were there early Saturday morning and doing their FBI crawl around thing.
Right, because the marshals responded first.
The marshals were there.
They initiated it, right?
Yeah. The marshals, and that's another story. I sat through some of the trial, and, the marshals spent over a year trying to get Randy Weaver to surrender. Over a year. They did everything they could to avoid a confrontation. Rules were in place. There were kids in the cabin. We don't want a problem. We don't want this. They tried so many different ways and Randy had basically shut the door to everybody. He had already been arrested once by ATF on a ruse, and he said, you'll never do that again. It was just an uncomfortable situation. Then, of course, with the shooting, again, nobody knows what really happened other than the fact that Bill Deegan got murdered and Sammy Weaver got killed, and the dog got killed, and all that kind of stuff, and the rest kind of went downhill. But when we got there Monday, I went through a debriefing with the marshals and the FBI guys, and they knew at that time Sammy Weaver was dead. Nobody else did. HRT had crawled up and looked in the shed where his body was, and so we knew that Sammy was dead. So our job. HRT had already taken the hill. I mean, they had surrounded it and they had everything set up and doing their, FBI thing. Marshals was covering a lot of the ground between the hill and what we'd call the federal encampment. There, I think the federal government had gotten every U-Haul truck and trailer in Idaho and every Humvee that they could get, and 2 helicopters. It was a pretty big city halfway up that mountain. And they said, well, ATF, you're going to be responsible for the perimeter down by the creek, the road that leads up to Randy's place and the creek where all the demonstrators were. When we got there, there was a lot of demonstrators, anti-government, wannabe Nazis, just all sorts of goofy people.
Like sovereign citizens?
Say again?
Sovereign citizens, basically?
Some were. Others, we saw guys that were just arguing for free marijuana. Take your pick. It was a potpourri of people.
If you're anti-government or anti-law,
show up.
Why not?
Exactly.
It's kind of like Antifa now and BLM now.
Randy,
no matter what your cause.
Randy Weaver was wanted on a federal warrant, correct?
Yeah. So I feel like that's probably a good idea, is because we have some people that maybe aren't familiar. So I maybe back up the story a little bit and give, because my understanding is Randy Weaver moved to Idaho because he was tired of, he wanted to raise his kids his way, religiously, spiritually, emotionally, educationally. He moved to the middle of nowhere so he could mind his own business and live exactly the life that he kind of envisioned for himself, right, wrong, or indifferent. That was his plan, was to just get away from everybody and do his own thing. But he got caught up and there's a lot of debate out there. You can look it up if you want. He got caught up in the Christian identity movement, and he got caught up in guns and doing things with guns that are against the law.
Yeah, pretty much. He had attended the World Aryan Congress over at Butler's place a couple of times. Actually, if you look at the situation, Randy Weaver had his own beliefs and his own stance on things. Vicky was smarter than Randy. Vicky's always smarter than Randy. She was the brains of that outfit. But he had gone to the meetings a couple of times. Wasn't overly impressed with Butler or his people. But he did identify with the Christian identity movement. That's where he met an ATF informant who had also gone to these meetings. They established a lightweight rapport. But you have to realize this is a 3-year investigation from the time that they looked at Randy to the time that he actually sold the shotguns. 3 years. Yeah. And it's still, you go back to the same thing. Did the guy tell him just give him sawed-off shotguns, or did he just tell him just to sell him some guns? You get different opinions. You get different statements. We do know that Randy did saw the barrels off of 2 shotguns.
Right.
Which is a crime.
Very short. Sold them to the informant, and then of course, the informant turned him over to the ATF agent. At that point, Randy wasn't really the big deal. They were more concerned about Butler's group and the identity movement and the Aryan nations, especially with a series of bombings I know that had taken place around Coeur d'Alene that tied back to some of his people. And so they were looking at developing another person in the group, and Randy fit great. He was really not an informant. He was one of the true believers, if you will.
Right. So the idea was to get Randy on something and flip him.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
And so they got the shotguns. And again, they didn't act very rapidly on it. It was a few months later that finally a couple agents contacted him and said, hey, federal felony, crime, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to work for us, we can help you out. And Randy just told them, go pound sand. I'm not going to be a snitch for the government. I hate the government, et cetera, et cetera. So again, a couple of months go by, and finally they get around to indicting him. And he had already made it very clear with the first contact by ATF that he wasn't going to, be going down easy.
Right. He's up on his mountain, and he wants nothing to do with it. Yeah. And you can kiss his ass. That was Randy, right, wrong, or indifferent. Randy Weaver's idea was, I don't give a crap what you want. I'm not doing it. Yeah.
No, it was right there. Anyway, they said, well, we got to hook him up. So they staged a broken down car down at the bridge, the Ruby Bridge, where you have to come down to go into town. And Randy and Vicky stopped, and they got out to see what was going on. That's when they arrested Randy. Actually, Randy tried to grab a gun from one of the agents while he was there.
Jesus.
Yeah, he did. And he was armed. He had a gun in his pocket. So he was taken down rather forcefully. And Vicky tried to run back to the car. She had a gun in her purse, but she didn't make it. So he got hauled into court, and the judge gave him a bond, told him, you're charged with these crimes, and your trial is going to start February 19th. And sent him away. He gave him orders, contact pretrial services, contact probation, et cetera, et cetera.
No, he's basically out on bail. And
yeah, that was it. And so he actually called the pretrial services officer, and the guy had no paperwork. He says, give me a call next week. I'll have paperwork by then. And then the court realized they gave him the wrong date. Instead of February 19th, it was supposed to be February 20th. So they call the probation officer, said, when you contact Randy, when Randy contacts you, tell him it's February 20th. So probation typed up a letter, sent him a letter with the date of March 20th, and sent it to him. Now, I don't think Randy was going to come in no matter what date it was. He had already made up his mind. But the fact is, the government screwed up a couple of times. They tried to contact him. They couldn't contact him. They just couldn't do it. And when February 20th rolls around, he wasn't there. Bench warrant gets issued, failure to appear. Now the marshals get involved. That's their job. And they had talked to neighbors, and the neighbors said, I don't think you ought to go up there, and da-da-da-da-da. And he was sent letters, and they tried phones, but he didn't have a phone up there. So basically, they were kind of in a quandary. They had the same info that a lot of people had. Big, bad ex-Green Beret, booby traps, lots of guns, blah, blah, blah. And they had to be careful. And they were very careful. And they knew the kids were up there, 4 or 5 kids. They also knew that everybody came out of the house was armed.
It was like a fortified military compound.
Yeah.
It was probably improvised. Yeah, in their mind, it was all probably improvised and kind of
ramshackle shack.
Right.
That was about it. But again, nobody, could actually get close enough to determine that. And, I heard underground bunkers, you had underground bunkers. They were full of food, for storage.
Right.
So anyway, that was kind of the scenario on the marshals. And they really tried to avoid a confrontation. And they did everything they could. Even after a year, they decided the best way to get him out away from the kids would be to pretend to buy some land adjacent to his property and send some people up there, some marshals, and look like they're developing the land themselves to live there. They figured it would take them a year to do that. This is already after a year. So you're looking at almost 2 years of trying to avoid a confrontation. And then what happens? August 21st, they run into each other and the shots are fired, which was a tragedy all the way around.
Right. So now my understanding of that, and I want to ask you because you'll know better than I do, is marshals had a team that were intent on getting intel and possibly taking Randy into custody, best case scenario.
They had the team that was up there, six guys, and 3 and 3. 3 guys were overlooked. 3 guys, so the Deegan, and the other 2 guys were down doing the creepy crawly. Mm-hmm. They had no intention of arresting Randy Weaver. They were just doing a surveillance.
So it was just a low crawl.
It was just a low crawl. They, a couple of guys had never been up there before, and they tried to get up there in the dark, and unfortunately they didn't make it. It was daytime. And while the guys on the mountain could watch down to where the other 3 guys were, all those heavy underbrush. The dog keyed on them. Randy and Kevin Harris had come out. Sammy Weaver had come out. The dog was barking.
About what, 14, I think?
13 or 14, yeah.
It says right here 14.
Yeah.
Yes. Sammy Weaver's Randy's son, and it's the family dog, but it's also Sammy's dog, and the dog keys in and the dog takes off.
Well, the dog started barking, and talking to the marshals later, at least their statements were they started backing down the hill. I mean, they were trying to get out of there.
The dog was barking?
Yeah, the dog's coming. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the dog's coming.
They've been made.
We don't have, So they're scurrying down the hill. At a certain point, they're not getting very far. They're not running away fast enough, I guess. They decided just to stop and hunker down and see if the dog kept coming. Randy kept coming, Kevin kept coming, and then at the Y, which I walked that Y a dozen times after this was all over, the dog keyed on them. Now, first they said they shot the dog, and then Sammy shot at somebody, and then Kevin shot Deegan, and there were a lot of rounds fired on both sides. And then they said, no, the marshal jumped up first and yelled, "Marshal, you're under arrest, Randy." The only thing that everybody agrees on is that Kevin Harris shot Bill Deegan. I mean, that's a given. There's not a great deal of information as to how Sammy was shot. He was hit in the shoulder, and then he was hit in the back. And whether one of the marshals was intentionally shooting at him while he was running away, I find that hard to believe. I think it could just been a burst of gunfire just to, hey, let's get the hell out of here, get them out of here. I don't know. You can argue both sides on that one.
Right. You can what if it to death, but none of us were there and we don't have video of it. So it doesn't really matter. The bottom line is a 14-year-old boy was killed.
Yes. And it's tragedy. And Deegan was killed. Another tragedy.
Right. An agent is killed doing his job, and a 14-year-old boy is killed for following his dog.
So, there you go. So that kind of laid the groundwork again. And HRT, the FBI gets called because they come in on, attacks on federal agents. HRT flew out, lickety split. This is the other bone of contention. is the change of rules of engagement. While they were en route, the standard shooting policy, most law enforcement, is you shoot to save your life or somebody else's, from death or imminent injury. Well, they changed the policy to say cleared to shoot any armed adult male. Whether they post that became
that's a huge shift.
That's monstrous. And
that was that FBI or was that across the board?
No, that was FBI. And when the marshals heard it, they said, ain't gonna, no. And when I heard it, I said, well, hell no.
Right.
That's wrong. See, at that point, we didn't know Vicky had been shot. We knew Sammy was dead, but we didn't know Vicky had been shot when we got there. Nobody knew.
Oh, so by the time you got there, Vicky was already
dead. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nobody, not even the FBI knew that Vicky had been hit. And what happened was, once HRT got out there, they established their snipers, a couple of sniper positions around the cabin, and the helicopter had been up. The FBI helicopter had been up a few times, flying around. And again, here's another issue: was it? Wasn't it? Somebody on the helicopter said they were shot at from the ground. The other people on the helicopter said they weren't shot at from the ground. So take that for a grain of salt. But
you know what? Can I just add that sounds remarkably similar to when you go to Waco and they say the helicopter was firing down and versus the helicopter was not firing. It's very interesting that it's kind of you have aircraft and you have some dispute over whether, there was engagement with the aircraft or not. It's just interesting parallel.
I'll throw my own bias in there. Nobody fired from the helicopter at Waco. It did take rounds. It took rounds, but there was actually at the trial, we actually had part of the helicopter brought in to show the bullet holes in it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and you can debate these things all you want, but ballistics don't lie.
Yeah. So anyway, so you got the snipers up, you got the helicopter either flying around or landing, who knows. Kevin and Randy came out of the cabin, and Randy walked over to the shed where Sammy's body was, and he had a rifle. And Lon Horiuchi was the FBI guy that was looking at him I don't think the distance was that far, maybe a couple 100 meters. And he saw him. He said he saw him raise a rifle, thought he was going to shoot at the helicopter. So he shot Randy. And Randy said, no, I wasn't going to shoot any helicopter. I was reaching up to open the door to the shed, whatever. So the round hit him. And at that point, Kevin was outside too with a rifle. And Randy ran back to the cabin and Kevin ran back to the cabin. Vicky had opened the door of the cabin screaming, get back in, get back in. And from where the FBI sniper was, and I've been up there. I mean, I saw the cabin where the FBI sniper was. When the cabin door opened, you can't see if somebody's behind the door or not, but it's blocked. But you can see people coming in from the outside trying to run up the stairs to get in the place. So Horiuchi took a shot at Kevin Harris, who was armed. And that round is the one that went through the door that hit Vicky Weaver in the neck and killed her. That round continued on and hit Kevin Harris in the side and injured him. So you got Randy wounded, Kevin wounded, Vicky's dead. I've seen pictures of the body. She was dead before she hit the ground. And now they're in the cabin. Everybody's screaming. Everybody's doing things. Horiuchi didn't know he shot anybody the second time. He didn't know he hit anybody. And, here's another thing that bothers me. At that point, nobody had tried to make contact with Randy or anybody in the house. Hey, federal agents, come out with your hands up. Nobody even tried that.
Right.
So after that, they had got some APCs. The FBI had gotten some APCs to go up there, and they threw a phone, a talk phone, with a line on it, and yelled at them, come out, pick up the phone, blah, blah, blah. Nobody ever would. Then it became a standoff. And,
well, yeah, they were taking rounds in their front yard. To them, they probably thought it was a ruse to go outside.
They firmly believed, and Randy had told them for years, the government will kill us. He believed that. And so we're there. We got there Monday afternoon, and we set up on the creek. The Seattle team, the Dallas team took days, and they gave us the midnights. We came on at 6 and worked till 6 in the morning. So we had a lot of fun trying to keep the goose steppers from crossing the creek, getting up behind us and all that. And, played a few games.
They were trying to do that.
Oh yeah. I caught one in the middle of the creek
wow.
one night. I was just laying down, being goofy, and had my AR-15, and I could hear this scrush in the creek. This is a narrow little creek. Couldn't be more than 6 or 7 inches deep. A lot of rocks. You can't sneak across it. And I had a big kill light taped to my rifle, so I just kind of leaned over and I flipped the light on. I caught this guy in mid-stride halfway across the creek, and slammed the bolt shut on the gun. He turned around and ran back, so it wasn't a big deal.
By the way, all of you gun guys who are thinking about, the Surefire Scout light with the pressure pad switch that you've got on your M-Lock Picatinny, I'm talking to Jess, and Jess had a fucking Kel light taped to his AR.
Duct tape
is
duct
badass.
tape.
Duct tape.
That
Duct tape, yeah.
is OG. That is badass.
It must have been heavy.
So, it was,
hell,
but I was
Kel
Kel
lights are freaking practically a baton.
Yeah, it was. But what was heavier was my Kevlar helmet. It kept falling down on my head when I tried to go to sleep. So no, but we that was our big deal. We were there, and we had some yelling things back and forth, and there was nothing really that dramatic. The news people were there all the time until something happened, some big deal, and I can't remember what it was. They all pulled out about 7 days into our being there to go to some other big deal. And so it was just us and the protesters. There was some people that came from out of state with some guns in their GMC Jimmy that were trying to get up there, and they got nailed. Idaho State Police, they were great. Those guys are great. They nailed them right there at the bridge, and we hauled them out and thrown them out and pulled the guns out and everything else. So there were some unkind people. I mean, there were a lot of yelling, and there was a couple of guys, local guys, who we were very concerned about. But they never did anything. They just looked bad. And
they rattled their sabers.
Yeah, they did. And but we had sabers too. So what the hell?
Right.
If the funny thing was, I mentioned the AR-15. The only reason I had it, we only had 2 of them. And come the day shift, we had to turn them over to the day shift guys. At nighttime, they'd turn them over to us. We had no night vision equipment. We had asked for some, ATF had just decided they were going to go to MP5s, but they're all in headquarters, and it wasn't until about the 10th day they sent us one. So most of the time we had sidearms. Yeah, sent us one. Most of the time we just had sidearms, the 2 ARs and a couple of shotguns. Not that we felt these people were going to violently assault us, but you just never know. We already got a dead deputy marshal, and that was enough to keep your wits about you.
Yeah, at this point, you guys sound like you have a whole lot of, I have no idea what's going on.
We had no idea what's going on, and it wasn't until about the 8th day we were able to get the FBI to come down and actually talk to us about what was going on higher up the mountain. I'd driven up there a couple of times with the agents just to where they were staging, which again, it was a small city. And, but I'm talking with a couple of bosses up there, but they seem to be out of the loop too. And finally,
is that where like Bo Greitz and all those guys were at?
Yeah, he didn't make it. Yeah, that's later on in the story.
Oh, okay. He hasn't arrived yet.
Not yet. No.
Okay.
So we'd come back, and we're doing our thing, and I got a call from one of my bosses who'd just been debriefed by I think it was Gene Glenn. He was a SAC from Seattle, really nice guy, good FBI agent, good guy. He said, we just had a meeting, and he told me on the earpiece, Vicky's dead. And we found that out because Greitz had showed up, and he said, I'll talk to Randy Weaver. We're Green Berets together, and blah, blah, blah. And at first, nobody wanted to listen to him because he was a big blowhard. And he brought these stormtroopers with him, the guys with the blue shirts and the cross bands and the Christian identity patch. I mean, and they're all fat guys with beards. So finally they let him go up there to talk to Randy. And that's when we found out Vicky had been killed and that Kevin and Randy were wounded. So he came out, told the FBI. I got the radio call, and I went, oh boy. Well, I said, they're going to let the people outside know she's dead. I thought, that's not a good idea.
It's definitely not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
Yeah.
And I called all of my guys and gals. I had two gals, one gal on the team. I got them all together. I said, let's gear up. We had a pepper fogger and we had spike strips and we had the bridge over the creek. I had actually gone down to the National Guard and got concertina wire to stretch out along the creek. So if somebody did get across, they would have a difficult time getting behind us.
Yeah.
So we figured we can hold the bridge if they decide to rush us with the pepper fogger and the spike strips. And there's probably 100, 150 people.
Oh, wow.
And
so,
how big is your team?
21.
Yeah.
I think we had 18 of us made it. But we had 3 or 4 Idaho State cops. And, there was help available. I'm not, downplaying that.
No, but 150 against 21, especially, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, well, we're ATF. We'll try anything. We don't have any sense. But so anyway, while I'm talking to my people, the FBI guy comes down and makes the announcement. We hadn't even had time to, unpack our gear. He comes down and he gathered everybody at the bridge, at the end of the bridge, and said, "Well, I got some bad news. Vicki Weaver's dead," and everybody just went screaming. And I don't know, shit, this is not good. And I thought, everybody tensed up, and I wished at that point I had a video camera. I took a lot of pictures, so I was up there, still pictures, tons of them. But I wish I had a video camera because they were yelling and screaming, and then about 30 of them formed a circle holding hands. And they started praying. So they choked up.
Yeah.
So they, nothing happened. After that, they all were sad. They still yelled, but nothing happened. They just yelled and they prayed and just kind of, I guess, mellowed out. Yeah, they did. Always grievance, no doubt about it. They're grieving. And so, a couple of days or day or so after that, the Grits got Randy out and they got Kevin out and they flew them out, to the hospital. And then they got Vicky's body out first. And then the kids all came out and we stayed another extra day and then it was all over. We packed up and left and, went back a little bit for the trial, listened to some of the trial activities. The government did not look good.
No,
there was, and of course, Randy was only convicted of failure to appear, which I thought was kind of stupid because they didn't give him the right day anyway. But he was obviously acquitted on any of the shootings, and Kevin Harris was acquitted of shooting Bill Deegan. And so,
well, and as we discussed, we weren't there, so
yeah, I know.
It's. I look at this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my main lens is, okay, Randy Weaver, he's been somewhat kind of looked up to now as a hero figure to many people because, stand up against the government and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, Randy Weaver broke the law and told law enforcement, screw you, I'm not coming to court. And that started this whole thing. So if you want to know how this whole thing started, it's because a man who broke the law told the government, screw you, I don't care. Unfortunately, every other tragedy in this story stems from that decision.
Yeah, everything kind of starts from one point and then it snowballs. And in this case, it snowballed.
Now, they say that this is the day the American militia movement was born.
It was, yeah.
It'd been around for a long time.
I think that's just clickbait, but
yeah.
It's probably the day that the American militia movement was solidified as a movement. But I think because of all the pockets of militia movements and stuff that had been around, this just kind of probably gave them a unifying figure,
right?
Or a battle cry, like remember the Alamo kind of a thing,
right? Now, I might be reading like a biased article, but but I wanted to get your thoughts on it there, Jess. Do you think that during like the I guess the investigation and then the court trial, the FBI looked bad because there was like a cover up to hide mistakes and stuff like that happened?
The Justice Department in 1993 prepared a 500-page report, and it was not kind to the FBI. The U.S. Attorney's Office was upset that they had hidden information. The crime lab from the FBI would not release a lot of the stuff they wanted. There were some very serious problems with the FBI coming forward with a lot of information that they had. The crime scene was horribly searched. I mean, they let news people in right away.
The FBI did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Within 24 hours after Randy was gone, I got a call on the radio. Hey, you want to come up and see the cabin? I said, sure. I hop in Humvee, go up there. There are reporters and FBI people and people all over the place, stomping around. They had tape around the cabin itself, but
that thing should have been locked down for at least a week or two.
Should have been sealed. But yeah, the report, if anybody ever wants to sit down and read a very interesting thing about what had, I say the Justice Department did a pretty good, thorough study. They actually broke it down. Of course, the rules of engagement, the first rules of engagement were horrendous. Shoot any armed adult male. That was just horrendous.
That's like rules of engagement, like when you're going to war and it's like
you're in a war. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're at war.
And that, a lot of people pointed fingers on who actually wrote that up, but in fact, it was there. It's established. The other part that comes out of the Justice Department report, besides some of the FBI hiding, was the second shot that Horiuchi took. They actually figured the first shot was probably justified in that if he honestly believed the helicopter was flying overhead, honestly believed that Randy Weaver was going to shoot at the helicopter, he had a legitimate law enforcement reason to shoot at Randy.
Sure.
The second shot, while they were running to the cabin, they said, no, that wasn't there. There was no threat. They were running.
Right at that point, he's a fleeing suspect, and there's no exigent threat to the people in the cabin.
Yeah, and you hadn't seen him do anything.
Right.
They're just running, and especially, and of course, that was the one. Now, the FBI said the second shot was justified also, and the Justice Department disagreed. So again,
didn't they try to charge him?
Horiuchi was charged with the shooting of Vicky, and the Boundary County DA filed the charges, and the U.S. Attorney's Office had it removed to federal court and dismissed the charges. Once they filed in federal court, then they could do anything they wanted to do. And people argued, well, there's no real double jeopardy. If they want to bring him back to the county, they can. And the second prosecuting attorney, district attorney in Boundary County, came in after the first one and said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to recharge him. So he got away from that one without any legal issues. But, then again, I remember telling, just as an aside, one of the newer agents when I drove up to the federal city, I told him, you ought to look at this, all these federal cars, these helicopters, these Humvees, blah, 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 blah. In your whole career, you'll never see anything this big again. 5 months later, we had Waco. And, the same HRT, a lot of the same agents, everybody's down in Texas. So what am I on prognostication?
And it's an interesting series of dominoes from there because, you have Ruby Ridge and then 5 months later, Waco, and then selling bumper stickers on the side of the road, watching Waco go down as a young man named Timothy McVeigh.
Yep. And then get the Almura building going up.
And I mean, that's why I kind of point to some of these. I mean, obviously Waco would have happened regardless of Ruby Ridge, but on the heels of Ruby Ridge, I think things would have gone differently at Waco had it not been on the heels of Ruby Ridge.
Well, I'm not sure. We were at Fort McClellan after we left Idaho, down there doing SWAT training for a couple of weeks and working with the Dallas and the New Orleans team, the ones that actually put together the Waco raid. were sitting in the officers club one night, and they were telling us about this compound they were going to have to assault. And
so they knew.
Oh yeah, they'd been working the Koresh and those people for a long time, and they said, we went through the plan, and the guy, I remember one of the team leaders looked at me and said, "What do you think?" I said, "You don't have enough agents." I said,
Yeah,
you're going to try and take this with 2 teams, and you got over 100 people in that place.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, we'll catch them before they get to their guns. No, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. And it was, there another 500-page report by Treasury on that one is interesting reading too. I knew most of the people involved in that one also. And, you just sometimes you shake your head. You shake your head.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020.
It always is. It always is.
It's unavoidable. But I just feel like that was such a watershed moment that there's certain moments in law enforcement that change our mindset just as much as our policies. And when you talk about Ruby Ridge, you talk about Waco for federal agents, but also for armed standoffs that are quote unquote domestic terrorism or domestic terrorist adjacent, when they're trying to say that the Waco people are, some people are saying, oh, it's just a religious group that likes guns. And other people are saying, nah, not so much.
I'm religious. I like guns.
Right, exactly. And yet I don't live in a compound with a messianic crazy person.
You haven't seen the cannon in my front yard. No.
But anyway. I think just like North Hollywood, the North Hollywood shootout changed a lot of things. So did Waco. So did Ruby Ridge. These are watershed moments. Columbine is another one.
But you guys may not be old enough. I don't know. Remember Newhall and CHP?
Yeah, the Newhall CHP shootout. My dad,
I heard that. I heard that story going through the academy.
It's still, the fact that officers died with empty shell casings in their pocket.
I don't believe that. I don't. Yeah. I think that's a war story. I do not believe that.
You don't believe it?
That's my own personal opinion. No, the shootings are too fast, too furious. I honestly don't believe it, but I could be wrong. Like you say, we weren't there. But I find that difficult to believe. But the bottom line is, 4 officers lost their lives.
Right, and it changed the way we changed the training, changed the way we did everything.
Absolutely.
You go back to, it's funny is I talk about when people talk about Columbine and how Columbine changed our kind of metrics that we judge these active shooter scenarios by. And I always go back to one of the original high profile active shooters, which is the Texas Tower, Whitman.
Yeah.
And how did Whitman get taken down? By 2 proactive people that said no more, and they charged the tower and took him out.
Yeah.
And what's funny is then we got away from that. We got into this standoff mentality, and then after Columbine, we had to adjust, and we ended up going back to the original philosophy of no, take the threat to the bad guy and take him out. Yeah. So it's just interesting how, and that's why me personally, I think that with Ruby Ridge being so fresh in, especially federal agents' minds, you said it was even some of the same people, so now they're in this other scenario that's like, it's Ruby Ridge writ large, it's on a much grander scale. And so you're human beings. You can't help but be playing thoughts and scenarios and tapes, especially the after action report, the DOJ report that you're talking about. It was nowhere near completion. It hadn't even been started when Waco was going. So people are still trying to pick through the rubble of one incident, and then they're thrust into another one. It fundamentally changes the way those officers, as human beings, not robots, are going to react to that situation.
And it took them years to develop a scenario for a mass casualty tactical situation, to be able to formulate and come up with a game plan on how to attack it. And I think it's in the last 7-6 years that they actually came out with a set of standards that is on one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the world came up with it. And they adopted some military tactics with fire teams and things like that when you come in contact with these things, and standard operating procedures when you do come in contact with them. But it's crazy on how long it took them to come up with a game plan that is constantly changing and evolving.
Right.
But it's the first officers on scene. They hear the shots, they gather a fire team, they're 5 guys, you have your diamond, you have one in the center, and then you go, and then you radio for other people like, hey, get another fire team on standby, and then come in, and you go to where the shots are being fired, and you don't sit there and like you do a normal building search.
Right.
You start clearing every room, you go to where the gunshots are.
Yep.
And you go straight to it.
You aggress the threat.
Exactly. And then when the shots stop, you start searching, and you start doing a methodical search. And then when you hear it again, it's more of like an active ballistic search where you're going through and you're going towards the gunfire and the sound. And it's crazy on how it's evolved and changed, but it took a really long time to really come up with like a major scale, like, hey, this is how we're going to do it. This is the way it should be done. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And it takes terrible incidents to
it does
kind of develop those.
Yeah. Well, I used to have a kind of a protocol on high risk warrant entries. I would, I'm team leader, I'm going in first, whether I got the body bunker or not, I'm going in first. And usually if it was something that was really serious and we kind of knew the layout of the property we're doing, building or house, I'm going to the target. I mean, if he's in a bedroom, I'm going to the bedroom, and I'm not going to look in the bedrooms. I'm going to go look under desks. I'm going straight for that bedroom and control that person there. You people behind me, watch my back, and you do that slow looky poo and all that. But I want to nail this guy. I want to get him before he can get to a gun or get to do something bad. And, it's on you to cover my butt and make sure that the doors that I pass are closed. I'm not going to open them. I'm going straight where this guy is. Right. And that worked out a couple of times. I got attacked by a little dog one day in a hallway, and a small dog, just enough to grab my boot, and I couldn't kick him off. I ran into the guy's bedroom. There's a dog attached to my boot, and the guy said, "Get this dog off of me."
Okay, first get the dog. Second, put your hands on top of your head.
You can't shoot the dog. He's too small, and he's got half my boot in his mouth.
That's funny. Now, quick question for you, Jess. You were in a very electrically charged situation there at Ruby Ridge. Yeah. Now, how was the adrenaline and how was your state of mind being there? You had to have been tense the whole time, just on a high state of alert. How was that going there through all those hours while you were there? How was that feeling?
It's something. First of all, my concern is for my team. I want to make sure all the people I've got out there are going to be safe. And so, to be honest with you, that was my daily stress, if you want to say that. Talk to them, make sure they're okay. Did you get too cold last night? You need some more stuff. Did you clean your gun today or whatever? So usually in a case like that, as long as you're active, it doesn't hit you. It's like the adrenaline thing. Once the adrenaline goes away,
keep your mind occupied.
Yeah, exactly. You got to keep doing that and communicating with the other teams. What went on today? What happened today? We stayed in Bonners Ferry. We actually rented motel rooms in Bonners Ferry where my team stayed, and we associated with the town people. And for the most part, they were accepting. There was nobody that got in our face. A couple of them say, "Well, we don't like you being there, but we don't like those nutcases there anyway." So it was kind of a semi.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, something like that. It wasn't where I was so worried, like in Vietnam or something. It's this little person's going to come behind you and shoot you. I never felt that. Maybe a couple times, but the stress level after it was all over, yeah, I realized then I need several drinks.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So, now it all stopped is when you were like, okay.
Yeah.
That was wild.
Once it was done. Yeah.
This may seem like a broad question, but I'm hoping you might have thought about it long enough over these years. If you were to come away with one takeaway from that incident, one thing that you could say, we needed to do X better, whether it's communicate or whether it's slow down or whatever, what do you think your takeaway from that whole incident with all the agencies involved, the suspect involved, everybody involved, looking back in hindsight, if you could go give, you a piece of advice, what would you give yourself?
That's tough. I don't want to speak for other agents or other agencies. Obviously, everything I'm saying today is me only.
Yeah.
But you know, I would have probably just let it go. You know, he's got a warrant. He's got to come down off that mountain sometime. Just let it go. And, you know, if I look foolish by not going up and getting him. Now, there was a judge. The judge that issued the bench warrant was pressuring the marshals to bring him in. He wanted them to come get him. And he made
contempt
that
of judge.
Well, yeah. And that's understandable. I know a lot of judges, and no, I won't say anything about that. Anyway,
well, but I get what you mean. I know a lot of judges too.
Right. And if, you know, you go to Your Honor, you know, we're putting lives at risk. Why don't we just wait? And you know, we're going to be here for 100 years, and he's got to come off that mountain. Those kids are going to have to go to a hospital. They're going to have this. They're going to have that. All we got to do is wait for him to come down, and you know, that's it. But that's hindsight.
Right.
And like I said, I know the marshal's office, they had a duty to perform, and they literally were so patient on this thing and trying to do the right thing. It was just one of those strange glitches, you know, fog of war thing where they ran into them that day at the Y. Otherwise, they would probably still be crawling around a mountain. I don't know. But that's the only thing. I mean, we've done warrant executions a number of times, you know, bad guys with guns and stuff like that, but not a situation quite like that. We did one Hell's Angels raid down in San Benito County once, where the guy had his compound with barbed wire all around it and rattle cans with rocks in it and dogs. I mean, it was a pretty heavily fortified compound. And, you know, we kicked it around a few times. And so all I did, I sent out 3 or 4 long rifles to surround the place, and said, what the heck, you know, let's go. And we did. I mean, we just crashed the gate and got to the house before he was even out of bed. The nice thing about going early, most of these people sleep late anyway, unless they're up on crank. But we hit the house, and he was still in bed. But he had a spotting scope, and a rifle right there in the kitchen window where he could see the gate. So, you know, that could have been uncomfortable if he had been up and awake, but it wasn't. You know, who's to say? Dude?
I've read a lot about this. I've studied a lot about it, and that's why I was really super stoked to know that we'd be sitting talking to you with firsthand accounts, because one of the things that I've just looked at this situation so many different ways, and you know, the bottom line is there's things that every single person there could have done differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All Randy had to do is come in.
Yep.
And he would, I swear if he had gone to jail, I'd have been shocked. They'd have probably fined him, put him on probation, and sent him home. You know, and he says, I got a wife and 5, 6 kids. I got to take care of them. There's nobody to watch them. The judge would go, fine, you know, go away.
Right. But at this point now, Randy, because he refused, his wife died.
Yeah.
His son died.
Yeah.
He got shot. His buddy got shot, and a federal agent lost his life, and a family lost their dad. You know, like there's all these different things because one person makes a decision that affects so many other people's lives. And whether that's Randy Weaver, or whether that's the FBI agent who rewrote the rules of engagement, or whether that's the FBI agent who took the sniper shots, or whatever it is, there's all these different moments, and you can what if it to death, but that's not what happened.
No, but that's what after action reports are about. That's where you do the murder boards. You sit down, and then you ask yourself the same thing after everything you do. What did we do wrong? And there's always something we did wrong. I guarantee you that. And you try and let's not do that again, you know?
Yep.
And that's important. It's always important.
That's one of the things I've tried to hammer into my children, is something that was hammered into me by my grandfather, by my father, and then by the department, which is we go over our mistakes, and we take responsibility for our mistakes honestly, whether it's, you know, looking at a police officer who made tactical errors and got themselves killed. We don't do it to disrespect their memory and say, oh, look at all the mistakes he made. We do it so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And if you're not honest about your mistakes, if you're not honest about your shortcomings, if you're not honest about things you could have done better, you aren't going to learn from it, and you will make the same mistakes. And to me, that's the greater sin, is not the mistake. It's to not learn from it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. After every situation, regardless if you're federal, military, state, local law enforcement, municipal police, after any tactical search or tactical operation, there has to be a debrief, because there are going to be things you mess up on. Did you enter in too hot? Did you overshoot while you were searching?
Did you miss something?
Right.
Did you planning phase? Did you
exactly?
Yeah. There's
always
all
be
kinds
something.
of things. Mm-hmm.
And people need to,
and we can always do better.
Yeah. And I've seen it firsthand where, people get their feelings hurt and butt hurt when you're sitting down doing a debrief, a tactical debrief, and you're like, hey, you messed up, don't do it again, but we need to learn from it. Sure. Good job on this and this and this, but this could have been different. We could have changed this, because maybe someone got hurt, or maybe it had the ability for someone to get hurt, like an officer or, a person, a suspect, citizen, whatever. It happens all the time. And, I think that a lot of, law enforcement needs to get back to it more frequently. And I've seen it to where it used to happen after every scenario, after every tactical situation. And then all of a sudden we kind of started to stray away from it, because maybe we were so busy where we had to get to the next call, we had to get to the next, perimeter or whatever. But you need to take that time, that 5-10 minutes after every situation scenario in law enforcement, and talk about it, debrief it real quick. And if it's something really serious, there's going to be a longer tactical debrief later, but you got to go over it, because the crucial sin is happening again. Like you can't, if you don't debrief it, you won't know what you missed, and that's going to happen again. So you gotta attack it right when it happens, talk about it, that way it doesn't happen again, and no one gets hurt.
Yeah. And if you know you made a mistake, call yourself out. And if somebody else points out your mistake, own it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You got to stand up. You've got to, where you were talking about that other thing. I remember we were arresting a guy one night. He'd sold us a machine gun with a silencer, and we'd set a by bust. He was going to bring another machine gun, and two cars of agents, and the undercover agent was with him. He was on a little UC mic, so I could listen to him on my radio, and then the other agents that were in the other car were on the tactical channel. And once the undercover agent popped the go sign, I punched my key my mic on the radio, say, okay, let's move in. So we started moving in, and the other car wasn't moving. And we jump out and grab the bad guy. And then I see the other car moving. The guy pulled up. I says, what the hell's going on? He said, I didn't hear you. I was on the wrong frequency. I was still on the listen frequency. I had not changed to the tactical frequency. My fault. And I said, sorry as hell about that. That again. But
what are you gonna do?
That was on me. And fortunately, everything was fine. But it could have been uncomfortable for a lot of people. And so you do that. You do those things, and somebody's got to say, look, I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. I promise.
Exactly.
Well, Jess, this has been awesome, and it's thoroughly been enjoyable for me. This is one of those episodes that I just look forward to, and we would love to have you back, because it sounds like we've got at least 2 other things that we could chat about, and I'm sure there's a whole multitude of other stories that you have, especially that time in the ATF's history is it's like a lot of my dad's time. You kind of worked ATF about the same era that my dad was working LAPD, and it's the Wild West to a big extent.
We had fun. Fun.
So I appreciate it. But we always try to dedicate every episode to a brother or sister, officer or agent or firefighter that has paid the ultimate price. And so we usually let our guests choose who. And Chuck has told me that you have somebody that you would like to dedicate your episode to.
Yeah. Chuck had mentioned, of course, the Chicago officer, Ella French, I think was her name, who's recently lost the line of duty, which is sad. But out here in California, we had I get choked up again. We had a young lady, excuse me, Natalie Corona, who had gone to work for Davis Police Department, short time on the job, and she was just ambushed and killed. And that one, if you go on the websites and you look at things she posted and everything about her, just a glorious young lady. So for both
Yeah.
those ladies. That's
So
bless
for
them
Officer
and keep them in
French
their
and
mind.
Officer Corona,
Yes.
we've
Yeah.
got Rest Easy Sisters. We got it from here. If you've probably seen Natalie Corona's picture, she has this gorgeous photo of her in a beautiful blue dress holding a thin blue line flag blowing in the wind, and it was all over social media after she was shot and killed. She was very proud of the job. She was very proud of what she'd accomplished, and she cared a lot about what she did, as I'm sure Officer French in Chicago did. And some asshole decides to be an asshole.
That's about it.
It's super sad. I mean,
God bless.
Well, Chuck, do you have anything as we close out this episode?
yeah. If you guys want to come on the show, it's booking.warstories@gmail.com. I've been getting requests for correctional officers to come on. So if you're a correctional officer, we would like to hear from you. Email me there. Also, I'm still looking for some female military to come on so we can have a discussion. And I want to hear your take on it. I also want to hear your take on what it's like to be a female in the United States military.
Right.
Because my military MOS, was amphibious assault vehicles, and we didn't have any females in our unit. We were an all male unit, a combat unit. But I want to hear your take on what it's like to be a female in the United States military, whether it be Marine Corps, Navy, Army, Air Force, or Coast. Did I say Coast Guard?
Yeah.
I want to hear your take on it.
They're the military.
Exactly. They do some cool shit. I'm not going to lie.
They do.
They
get teased mercilessly, but they do really cool shit. We've had somebody from the Coast Guard on this show, and they do some really cool shit.
Yeah. So I would like to hear your take on it. Also, if you're, again, correctional officer, we would like to have you on. I've gotten hit up probably 4 times now, maybe 5. So it's coming more and more frequent. I know Duck Boy, he wanted to get his dad on because he was corrections over in Australia.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll absolutely do that.
We would love to have him on, maybe with Duck Boy. But quick update. We're going to be having some new shirts, so be on the lookout for that. They will go quick. It is a small order, and then if you guys like it, we will come out with more. So it'll be a limited release, very small order. So you buy it, we buy more.
Yeah, when they're gone, we'll get some more if people like them, and also the patches, the new patches for those of you that signed up for the website, they should be here soon, and so we'll be able to get those out to you right away, along with the stickers. So just stand by for those. You'll get them as soon as we get them. We're just waiting on them to arrive, and all the transit times. Man, it's amazing how shipping times are still messed up from COVID, but everybody's understaffed and having a hard time. So stay tuned for that. And you can always catch us talking about current events with Matt and Marco on the Locker Room Podcast every Thursday. It's not for everybody, but it is for those of you who want to have some fun and not get so serious about it as we are here. And Jess, again, I can't thank you enough. I hope you had a good time, and I hope you come back.
Oh, I enjoyed it. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yes,
appreciate it.
I'll be good.
Well, until our next episode, come home with your shield or on it.